The prison was eerily silent save for the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional shuffle of feet. It was the kind of quiet that made time feel heavier, each second stretching into eternity. In a small, dimly lit cell, John Walker sat alone, awaiting the inevitable. His hands, calloused and worn, rested on his lap, trembling ever so slightly. His eyes, deep wells of regret, stared at the wall, unseeing. John had spent years behind bars, serving time for a crime that had shattered many lives, including his own. His sentence had finally reached its end, execution. The electric chair awaited him, and with it, the end of a life that had once been full of hope and promise. But before the final moment, he was granted a single request, a last wish that would be honoured by the state. Without hesitation, John had asked to see his dog Max one last time. Max, a loyal golden retriever, had been his companion through the hardest parts of his life. The thought of seeing Max again was the only light in John's dark world. The guards, though puzzled by the simplicity of the request, agreed it wasn't common, but there was something profoundly human in John's wish that struck a chord with those who had long seen him as just another prisoner. As the appointed day approached, arrangements were made to bring Max to the prison. John's anticipation grew, his heart clinging to the hope of that final reunion. Memories of Max flooded his mind. The dog's joyful bark, his wagging tail, the way his eyes sparkled with unconditional love. John hadn't seen Max since his incarceration, and he longed to feel the dog's fur under his hands once more, to look into those forgiving eyes. Finally the day arrived. John was led to a small fenced yard outside the prison's main building, a place usually reserved for rare visits. He stood there, the cold air biting at his skin, waiting. Minutes passed, and then he saw him, a golden flash bounding across the grass, tail wagging furiously, ears flapping in the wind. Max! Tears welled up in John's eyes as Max rushed to him, leaping into his arms with unrestrained joy. The dog's exuberance brought John to his knees, and he wrapped his arms around Max, holding him as tightly as he could, as if trying to memorize the feel of his old friend in that one embrace. Max licked John's face, his tail wagging so hard it seemed like it might fall off. John laughed, a sound that hadn't escaped his lips in years, and for a moment the weight of his impending fate was lifted. But something unexpected happened. Max, as if sensing the depth of John's sorrow, sat back and looked into his eyes, letting out a soft whimper. He pawed at John's chest, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored John's own. It was as if Max understood that this was goodbye, that this reunion was the last they would share. John felt the depth of Max's empathy, his silent communication, and it broke something inside him. He sobbed openly, burying his face in Max's fur, apologizing over and over, not just for what had led him to this point, but for leaving Max, for not being the man he should have been. The guards, standing at a respectful distance, were moved by the sight. Some turned away, wiping their eyes, while others stared, riveted by the purity of the moment. Max didn't leave John's side. He stayed close, offering comfort in the only way he knew how. He licked John's hands, nuzzled against his neck, and lay at his feet when John sat back, drained by the emotional flood. As the minutes passed, John knew time was slipping away. He whispered to Max, telling him how much he loved him, how much he would miss him. But Max, as if understanding that John needed something more, gave him a look, one of pure, unwavering love. And in that look John found a peace he hadn't known in years. When the guards finally came to take John back, Max stood his ground, letting out a protective growl, refusing to be parted from his master. It took gentle coaxing from one of the handlers, and even then Max's eyes never left John, following him until the door closed behind them. That moment changed everything. News of John's last request and Max's reaction spread through the prison, reaching the warden and even the governor. In the days that followed, petitions for clemency circulated, calling for John's life to be spared. The story of a man seeking redemption through his last act of love touched hearts everywhere. People who'd seen John as nothing more than a criminal began to see him as a man capable of deep emotion and regret. In a twist of fate, the governor granted John clemency, commuting his sentence to life without parole, and while John would spend the rest of his days behind bars, he did so knowing that his last wish had not only given him peace, but had also saved his life. And Max, he became a symbol of hope, visiting John regularly, their bond unbroken, their story a testament to the power of love and forgiveness.